Hello, folks. I'd like to welcome you to, as my phone explodes, my apologies. So let's start again. Hello, folks. I'd like to welcome you to the NIFA speaker series. Tonight we have with us Julia Harrington and Patty Wagstaff. Julia competed for several years at the University of Illinois and then went on to various other things and came back and judged for years and now judges continuously with us as we move forward. So thank you all both for attending. Thank you for supporting NIFA, and I'll turn it over to you, Julia. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much for the intro, Taylor. And just a little more about myself. I also, after graduating from the University of Illinois, I went on to become a corporate pilot and am now a captain on 2 Citation aircraft out of Chicago, and recently bought and fly aerobatics in my own decathlon, and just finished my first competition aerobatics season. But I'm not the reason why we're all here tonight. So let me introduce Patty Wagstaff. She was a 3-time U.S. National Aerobatic Champion, a 6-time member of the U.S. National Aerobatic Team. She's an inductee of the National Aviation Hall of Fame, a recipient of the Bill Barber Award for Showmanship, and a 6-time recipient of the First Lady of Aerobatics Betty Skelton Award. So welcome, Patty. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Julia.
I know that not all of our all the people joining us tonight have had the pleasure of seeing you fly. So I wanted to share a little video so that they could have that experience.
About to make it rain. Let me give you something now to celebrate. Come on. And if you're wondering why I move the way I do, I just feel so good. Oh, I just feel so good. Oh, I just feel so good. I just feel so good. I just feel so good. I see the world through my thrift store shades, rose-colored lenses and a fake gold frame. Playing all my songs on an air guitar, posing for your picture like a superstar. Yeah, come on. And if you're wondering why I move the way I do, I just feel so good. I just feel so good. Oh, I just feel so good. I just feel so good. I just feel so good. If you feel it, just dance along. Keep the feeling going on and on. If you feel it, just dance along, dance along, dance along. Yeah, if you feel it, just dance along. Got to keep the feeling going on and on. Yeah, if you feel it, just dance along, dance along. Oh, I just feel so good. I just feel so good. I just feel so good. I just feel so good.
So I hope you enjoyed that.
Great video you put together. You got some footage from Doug too.
I did. I got some footage from Doug, and some of it's from when we have flown together a couple times.
Yeah, I recognize those ponytails going.
Yep. Yeah. Very recognizable.
Yeah.
But obviously you didn't start off in aviation at that level. So I'd love to go back to the beginning. What were your earliest experiences with aviation?
My earliest experiences were with my dad when I was really little, and he let me sit in the cockpit of a DC-6 and DC-7 when he was flying when I was a kid. But, it's really too bad kids can't do that today.
Yeah, I know.
Unless they're maybe corporate or, private, of course, but not airlines. So I've been around aviation my whole life. I mean, I have earlier memories than that when I was 2 or 3 years old with my dad, B-25. And I had pictures of my mom taking me out to see him. And so it's always been part of my life.
That's so cool. But when did you decide that you actually wanted to, go become a pilot and get your pilot ratings and all of that?
I always wanted to fly. I had the opportunity after I moved to Alaska. I was in my late 20s, and I was living in this little bush town called Dillingham, small town in Southwest Alaska. And I was in a crash where we crashed at the end of the runway, didn't get off the runway. And that's really when I decided I was going to learn to fly, because I thought I could do better. And, being around aviation all my life, and I had a real affinity for airplanes, and I said, I can do this. So I started taking lessons, and then I found this amazing student loan program that they don't have anymore, at least not to this level, but I borrowed enough money at a low interest rate, and about half of it was forgiven just by living in Alaska, and finished and started getting all my ratings. And I had no idea where it was going to lead. Got my, instrument commercial, multi-engine, CFI, double I, and part of my helicopter rating, seaplane rating too, all on the student loan program.
That's so cool. Was that all in Dillingham?
No, it was partly in Dillingham and the rest in Anchorage. And I had met my husband during that period of time too. And he also had an airplane. He had a 185. And so we used to fly in that a lot. So I was exposed to a lot of aviation, but I didn't know where it was going to go. I started instructing and, enjoyed it, but I didn't. My sister's an airline pilot, and that's what she always wanted to do. And that's where she headed. But I didn't really have, it's funny. My husband said, I don't want you to be gone from home all the time if you're an airline pilot. Of course, I ended up being gone all the time,
right.
flying air shows and competing. But, it's ironic. But yeah, no idea where it was going to lead. And then I went to an air show, went to a competition, and said, that's what I want to do.
So where in your training was that? How far along were you in your pilot ratings when you started doing aerobatics?
I believe I had gotten my CFI at that point when I started taking aerobatic lessons.
That's awesome. And how long was it?
But there was nobody up there. There was nobody in Alaska to teach me. So, and then I took a 10-hour course with a woman named Darlene Dubé, who had a decathlon, a little 150 horse decathlon like yours.
Yeah.
And then we bought a decathlon, and it was a 1977 super decathlon. I think we paid $23,000 for it.
I wish I paid that for mine.
Things have changed. And of course, money was worth more then, but it was still relatively a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
And I just started practicing, and I kept asking people, do you think I could compete? I really want to try it. And, do you think it's a stupid, like I'm stupid to even think about it? And, I thought you just had to be naturally talented. I mean, I don't know if anybody's real natural in any of this stuff. And I thought, well, I don't know if I'm, good enough, or I'll ever be good enough to compete, even at a lower level. And people are like, yeah, you could do it. And I'm like, are you sure? And I didn't realize it's just a process like anything else, but I didn't know. So.
Yeah. So how long was it from when you got your decathlon to when you competed in your first competition?
It was a few months. I went and practiced. We didn't have any competitions in Alaska. We didn't have a box. I'd never flown in a box. I subscribed to Sport Aerobatics, the IC magazine. And I really didn't know too many people. Dwayne Cole was very encouraging, because I'd gone to take lessons with him. And said, yeah, you can do it, and so on. So I decided to start an intermediate. I'd never, I'd been to one contest and watched, and I said, I can do that. But I really didn't know. And so I flew down to, I think it was in late July. We probably bought that in March, maybe February of that year, in 1984. And And then I flew the plane down to Fond du Lac, Wisconsin for the IAC championships in August, late July, early August. And
That was your first contest?
yeah. It took me about 4 days. It was a long way, and it took me about 4 days to get to Minnesota. And then it took me like 3 days to get to Wisconsin because of weather.
Yeah, that's how it happens.
Yeah. And then I competed, and I'm very proud to say I didn't come in last. I was close.
Good. Well, intermediate in a decathlon, I don't know what intermediate was like then, but that's quite an undertaking.
Not the same.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, there were maneuvers I'd never done before. I remember there was a roll on a 45 up, and I'd never done that. My God, wow. And then afterwards, I was so nervous. I thought, I had already flown a couple little air shows. People invited me to fly some, I was really high. I'd flown one in May of that year and another one. And I said, that was fun, but competition, I'm a nervous wreck. Why am I doing this? And I didn't know, if I wanted to continue, but
yeah,
obviously I did. So
yeah, it's funny because like the glory is in the air shows, but the precise, rewarding, but very challenging flying is in competition. I was at a contest a couple of weeks ago in Michigan, and they actually invited, the local, the people of the town came out. It was up in a little town in northern Michigan, and so they all sat in the grass near the taxiway. And it was funny because as we all shut down, they would like clap for us, and so we all felt like air show pilots. But we're all flying up at 1,500 and above. So
yeah,
but yes, we got a little taste of that, and yeah, it's so much more fun than when they tell you how not perfect all of your
and that balance. I always did both at the same time. And I flew those air shows first. And I always thought it was a good balance, because you go to a contest, you're right, and everything you do, you can't do anything well enough. Nothing's a 10.
Right.
Get critiqued on everything you do. And then you go to a show and you can't do anything wrong. Basically, everything you do is wonderful.
Right.
The best. And
yeah.
So having the balance is really good. I think if I had only done air shows, I mean, that wouldn't have encouraged me to be the best pilot I could be. And if I'd only done competition, I probably would have gotten very discouraged.
That's fair. Was it hard to go back and forth between air shows and competition?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It was really hard. And I watch Rob Holland now, who's doing both. And I think I totally sympathize with what he's going through. The flying is so different in competition air shows. And you can't take competition flying. You can take the precision of competition and the skill,
right,
but you can take the maneuvers and translate them or bring them to air shows. Exactly. You don't draw these long down lines, and you have to adjust everything. And there's a lot more adjustment for wind and just so many things that are so different. And so to do both, I would have to really plan, especially getting ready for the big contests like the nationals. I'd really have to plan ahead about, when I was going to do an air show and how much time I'd have to practice beforehand and so on. So it's hard. It's rewarding, but it's difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure you had to practice a lot in each style before different events and spend time with the air show flying versus the competition sequences.
You don't have to practice as much for air shows. You do. I mean, you have to practice when you get to the site, but once you have an air show routine, it's not the same kind of practice. Mm-hmm. But I found that once I kind of retired from competition, I became a much better air show pilot over the years. I was able to experiment with more, feeling more comfortable down low and doing things on takeoff and things like that, because I wasn't bouncing back and forth.
Mm. Yeah. So how many years was it from your first competition to when you won the U.S. Nationals for the first time?
7 years it took me. And when I talked to other people and I, looked at what other people done, that was about average. It took about 7 years full time.
That's impressive. How many hours do you think you were flying per year at that time of aerobatics?
I've ever flown more than 250, 300 hours total, but that includes a lot of cross country. I mean, aerobatic flights, as you know, are very short, 8 minutes, 20 minutes, sometimes longer if you're working on specific, combinations of maneuvers or whatever. But, and competitions are very short. Each flight is about 6 minutes. And air show flights are about 12 to 15 minutes or so, 10 to 15. So, it's more the intensity of it than the amount of,
right,
I mean, airline pilots have a lot more time than I do, or corporate pilots, might have 20, 30,000 hours at this point. I have about 11.5, something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, those flights are definitely shorter. Did you have a coach at that time?
We didn't have the coaches like they do now. I mean, later on, Sergey Boryak was my coach. He, I would kind of hire him to come and coach me, and we'd get together with him. But we just coached each other, and I would find the best people I could. And I mean, I did have some coaches, yeah, but it wasn't as formalized as it is today, where you can have these. There's a lot of training camps and coaching, and usually it was a bunch of us would get together and coach each other and critique each other.
That's
and it
cool.
worked. Yeah, and then everybody had their own mentors. I had Clint McHenry was really the person that I wanted to emulate. I really loved his style of super aggressive but very smooth flying. And he was just such a nice person, and really great role model in so many ways. He was always gracious to people and had a good sense of humor and so on and so forth. And competition, you get really ratcheted up, and everything's the end of the world and all that. And to be around somebody like that always had a sense of humor, was important.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the students can kind of identify with this. I know the NIFA competitions aren't quite as intense as the aerobatic contests, but as someone who's done both, the IAC contests definitely have a very similar vibe. It's, very, very similar in terms of, how it feels and just going through the weekend, but also the camaraderie. It's really great. It was an easy transition to go from competing at NIFA to IAC contests. If anybody is looking for that environment beyond college, it's definitely a really fun and cool experience, but it is hard.
Yeah, but that must have been giving you a great background to get into competition aerobatics. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
I mean, and not even if you didn't go to competition aerobatics, just having that experience of competition made you a much better pilot, much more precise pilot, I'm sure. And I didn't have any of that. I really wish I did. We didn't have any sports in the schools I went to. I went to these sort of antiquated girls' schools when I was a kid, and we didn't really have anything like that. We didn't compete against other schools. And I remember them saying when I first competed, oh, girls don't compete as well because they're not competitive in school. And I said, that's ridiculous, for number one. But on the other hand, we didn't have any kind of team sports or anything like that, and we didn't compete against other schools. And I think that would have given me a good background. Of course, it's all changed now, Title IX and so on. But anything you do like that, you learn a lot about yourself, about how you deal with stress and how you deal with failure or defeat or whatever you call it. Whatever you choose to call it. It's more like just to evolve, evolution.
Totally. Yeah. I had flashbacks. So my first time flying in the box, I had flashbacks to my first NIFA nationals doing spot landings when I went to take off, because there was, 50 judges in yellow vests next to the runway. And it made me so nervous that I just totally botched both of my landings. And I finally got over that, but I had flashbacks to that feeling and having to just kind of try to block that out and just focus on what you're doing and not think about the people that are on the ground. But yeah, with the landings, it's a little more immediate because they're literally right next to the runway as you're trying to land on the line. But yeah, it was a good experience.
Sure. It's really hard.
Totally, for sure. How did you know it was time to step away from competition and just do air shows full time?
That's a good question. There were a few things. One, I had this goal set that I was going to win the nationals 3 times. And when I did it, I thought, there's nothing beyond that. I don't want to just stay in this as a hobby. There's other things I want to do. And some people approach competition like, this is just great fun. It's going to be a hobby. It's going to be something I'm going to do forever. And that's fantastic. And some people stay in a decathlon or a cub forever. You don't have to get an extra or a game bird or whatever, or the pits even. And that's great. And you can have a whole lifetime of, just great camaraderie and, flying. But I approached it really differently. I really went for it. I was at this time in my life, in this age, where I wanted to accomplish something that I thought was big and be really good at something and achieve something. And it, took the form of competition aerobatics. So I knew, I wanted to go for it, and then I was going to move on a little bit and take it somewhere else. So I always had that in the back of my mind. and I was doing it really full time, and it doesn't allow for anything else. I mean,
Wow.
you're wiped out. You know how hard it is physically, and you're wiped out, and you're always in training. And people, I remember somebody saying, "Hey, do you want to go do something?" And I'm like, "No, I'm in training, like, don't you understand?" I thought, oh my God, I
Mhm.
can't, I don't want to do this forever where I'm this, prima donna athlete, totally self-focused, I don't know about self-absorbed, but, very, much into what I was doing. And you have to be, it's you
At the
have to.
top level, yeah, you kind of
Yeah,
have to.
at the top of anything, you have to be that way, and you have to, isolate yourself from a lot of other things. And I thought, I don't want to do this forever. I don't want to be that person. And so I walked away in 1996 after I won it the third time, and then I competed at the World Championship that year, and I did really well. And I was really glad that it was time to. I remember leaving Oklahoma City, and I'd won this really great award there. I was really excited, and then I left. I went to fly the Cleveland Air Show and never looked back. It was hard though. It was hard for a while because for 12 years, I had woken up every day knowing what my job was,
Yeah.
and focus. And I would go to sleep every night dreaming about aerobatic sequences. That's how I fell asleep, or listening to tapes. And
I've done that too.
you don't have that. And it's like, you lose your tether. It's really weird. It's like you're floating off, and I had read a couple of books on the retiring athlete. And
Yeah.
it could be at 20 after a gymnastics career, it could be at any age. And it's just, when you
Yeah.
leave that field. And I had read, and I talked to people that said they got very depressed for several months or 6 months, or longer.
Mhm.
And I'm not a depressive person, but I was really wary of that. So I really focus hard on the air shows, and I always have looked to the next thing. It's
Yeah.
really important to have the next thing in mind, the next goal, the next whatever you're doing, so that you don't. But it was still hard.
Yeah, absolutely. What was your first world competition like?
The first World Championships was in England, and I was flying a Pitts. We were mostly flying Pittses. It was exciting. I remember first seeing the Sukhoi. The Russians showed up in these Sukhois. They were sort of like the Klingons, and these big badass airplanes, and they were kind of rough, like the paint. It looked like been painted just with a big brush, and they didn't have any compasses in the planes. It was still Soviet Union. There were a bunch of KGB hanging around, guys in suits, and you couldn't really talk. Even the Russians, the Soviet pilots that spoke a little bit of English, most of them didn't speak much. You'd go try and communicate with them, and some big guy in a suit would come stand there. And it was very, kind of exotic, and just meeting pilots from all over the world was fantastic. The French, and it was fun. I did okay. I didn't go there to win any medals, but I learned a lot, and we had a lot of bad weather being England,
Yeah.
I volunteer. They asked for volunteer. I always volunteer for the air shows and all these things, and so they said, we need a couple of pilots to go fly Fairford Air Show, which is a huge air show every year. One of the biggest ones in the UK. And I put my hand up, and Eric Mueller, famous aerobatic pilot who wrote Flight Unlimited, wrote the book, and really redesigned the whole Aresti system a few years ago. He unfortunately passed away. He passed away in his sleep, actually. Had a heart attack or something when he was in his 50s, in the late 90s, I think. But he was there, and he raised his hand, and of course we got to be really good friends, and we flew over to Fairford and flew, and it was like a 300-foot ceiling. It was raining. Eric was going up in the clouds. I was just doing rolls. It was exciting though. It was really neat.
That's a cool experience. Yeah, you've gotten to do a lot of global flying with your air show stuff. What's the most interesting place you've been?
Well, I've flown all the big trade shows, Paris and Farnborough, and that. I think Singapore was pretty interesting. Singapore I was flying the Texan 2 for Raytheon at that point, and or Beach. Maybe I'd gone back to Beach. They kept, now they're Cessna.
Right.
I can't keep up, but in the briefings, we flew over the water. It was right on the tip of Singapore, and on the other side of it was very close. There's, I think there was an island in between them, was Malaysia, and there are territorial boundary disputes on sea lanes, shipping lanes, I think. And so they'd tell us in the briefing, look, we don't want an international incident. You have to stay within this boundary. You can't go into Malaysia.
No pressure.
It was like dangerously close to going into Malaysia the whole time. And we're like, shit, it's in Malaysia today, and oh my God, they're going to shoot me down. And that was crazy. And then at the same show, it was the first time I'd flown a big show like that where there were drones up in the air while we were flying, and we didn't want them up there. And I remember the F-15 demo pilot, who was a friend of mine, was like, I don't want a drone up there when I'm flying my demo. And they're like, oh, sorry, that's going to be there. And at the end of the show, the drone pilots, well, first of all, I don't believe in calling drone operators pilots. I have a problem with that. But the drone operators, they were mostly Israeli, but I think they were from somewhere else. They would show up at the briefings and bring their computers, and they always had the best flight suits, right? We all came in like, sloppy airshow,
whatever, yeah.
And, with my flight suit tied around my waist, and they would come in very serious with zippers and really cool, looking like really sharp, like at the end of the show, they had a get together, little party for us or something for all the pilots, and the drone pilots, operators, whatever, came up and gave each of us a little packet, and in it was the drone view of our airshow routine.
Oh, that's cool.
Cool. It was weird though.
Yeah.
You could see them zoom in, they could see your face, and they'd zoom out, and it was creepy. So I still have it. I have to dig it out.
Yeah, I bet it's cool, but yeah, kind of weird for sure. Speaking of flying in exotic places, you spent a lot of time in Kenya doing instructing with the Kenya Wildlife Service. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you learned about that, how you got connected with it, and what that experience has been like working with those pilots?
I was invited to participate in a training program for the Kenya Wildlife Service Air Wing in 2001. And early in 2001. And at first I was a little hesitant and thinking, gee, am I going to live? I'd always wanted to go to Kenya, always. My mother had always talked about it, but I'd never been. And I picture myself living in a tent. My dad had flown in Africa and Kenya at one point and doing relief missions up into the Sudan and DC-6s and 7s. And he'd lived in a tent, and, it was a whole different deal. And I was a little leery about it, but when I started talking to the people, I realized we're going to stay in a really nice lodge. We're not going to, everything's going to be great. So, so we started in 2001, and I've done about 10 training sessions since then with the pilots. I really believe that it's helped. They don't get any training, any recurrency training when we don't go there. So I've brought different instructors with me, and usually one, sometimes two over the years at a time with me. So there's three. And the last time I went was 2 years ago, and I think it was 19. And between three of us, we flew mostly Huskies in a 206 and at that training session. But between the three of us in 5 days, we flew 85 flights.
Wow.
And each of us had one of those off days where you're just feeling like, jet laggy, tired, or kind of icky. And
yeah,
but we got all that done. We got a lot of flying done. So I think the pilots, they love it. They all get together at this lodge in Tsavo National Park, which has the biggest elephant population in Kenya. And I've been really, really fortunate to get to know a lot of people there. I have a lot of friends there. I've seen a lot of animals. I've done safaris. I've been all over Kenya, and I'm hoping to go back maybe next year. So
yeah. Can you speak a little to the mission of the Kenya Wildlife Service? I'm sure not everyone is familiar.
Yeah, I should have started with that actually. Kenya Wildlife Service is it's a parastatal, they call it parastatal. It's not true military, but it's sort of under the military. The pilots are mostly rangers, And, they've trained to become Kenya Wildlife Service Rangers, and they're dedicated to protecting wildlife. They patrol all the national parks. They fly Huskies, Super Cubs, 180, and they also have a caravan, a couple helicopters. And they're one of their main focuses is anti-poaching. So any signs of poaching, and I mean, the pilots are really good. They're really sharp. They can see when something's been disturbed. They can see when somebody's built a fire out in the bush. And their main focus is to protect the animals.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What a cool mission. It's such a cool thing to be involved in, I think.
Yeah, it's been probably one of the most rewarding things in my life.
Yeah. Well, another type of flying you did that helped protect the environment was for Cal Fire. Can you talk a little bit about that job? That's a unique, cool thing.
Yeah, I loved fire flying. I flew for Cal Fire for 3 years, and intended to keep doing it. And then things changed and I started the school, and, but I flew for Cal Fire out in California. I was based in 3 different bases. I flew the OV-10, I flew Air Attack, and we would go out, we'd get a call. You're on 6 days, you'd have to be at the base all day, and you'd hear an alarm. You'd have the plane ready in the morning, and you hear an alarm, you'd jump in the plane, you'd fly out to the fire. They'd give you coordinates, and a lot of times you took off, you could see it, you could see the plume of smoke, and you go out there, and we would circle it and decide what to do, whether it required a lot of resources or not, and call in tankers, call in helicopters, and it was all there to assist the firefighters on the ground, try and put the fire out. So California is the only state that has their own firefighting operation. Colorado, Arizona, all the other states rely just on federal U.S. Forest Service assets and resources. And California has their own fleet of airplanes. It's the only state that actually does that. And they have a big budget for it. The budget's gotten bigger and bigger, of course, as the fires have gotten bigger.
Right.
And they've got bigger airplanes, and it's a real fight every year. So it was a great mission. Yeah.
What was the application and interview process like for that for you?
I had to go through the interview process like everybody else. I studied for it, and I had to learn a lot about firefighting. And I had a couple of friends out there, one in particular, a guy named Hoser, really famous Navy pilot. He's passed away since, but he was really helpful, telling me all the things they might ask me. I had to know about the fire traffic area and, all these things. And I didn't know if I was going to get hired after the interview. I got interviewed by about 4 or 5 people with Cal Fire and with the state, and with the contractor was DynCorp. And so I had to go through the same process as everybody else, and, they hired me. So it was good. It was kind of, after being in the public eye for so long and going to an interview, and you're like, wait a minute, I can fly. I mean, come on, and, you kind of want to think, don't you know who I am? It's like, because I've given so many opportunities in aviation, and people don't question my ability. But it wasn't like that. And it's mostly all men. There's a couple of women that fly. There's several, 3 or 4 maybe. And so, it's a tough bunch. And I, being in air shows, you have to be, you're in PR, basically. You're in marketing and PR, and you're always on, and you always have to look the part, and, you just can't be a slob, basically. You just don't get hired. People don't want you.
Right.
And it's important that you're talking to people all the time and promoting aviation. And, you get into a job situation. It was my first aviation job where I worked for somebody else. And, you don't have to, you go to a tanker base, they don't have to talk to anybody. They don't have to, nobody has to be charming all day. It was kind of nice, actually. You go, get the plane ready, and you could sit there and read and hang out and work on your computer. And, you didn't have to, somebody walk in, you didn't have to turn and smile, I mean, I'm a friendly person, but you know what I mean? And some of the guys did, they were just whatever. And so it was really a different, it was kind of relaxing for a few years to do that. And then but I missed it. I missed air shows too. I did a few.
Right. So you mentioned that what pulled you away from that was the flight school. So can you talk a little bit about how the opportunity came along, how the idea came up, how your flight school came to be?
After I left Cal Fire, I wanted to become a seat pilot, a single engine air tanker pilot, and I decided to do that instead. But it was a little different lifestyle, and I wanted to be a tanker pilot, but I didn't want to fly for Cal Fire forever because it was so limiting to what else I could do. So I got all my drops done. I flew the air tractor 802s and 402, and I did my drops, and I got all qualified, and I went to school back in California. Went to I think it's NAFI fire, whatever school. Did all these, checked all the blocks, and then they said, new rule, all new seat pilots have to have 200 hours of ag time. And I fought it. I said, look, I have a lot of low level time. In fact, most of it's upside down, and
Right.
well, this is our rule. They wouldn't bend it. And I don't know if being a woman had anything to do with it too. I think it might have. It's a pretty tough world. And, it's just, there's all kinds of stuff going on there. But I thought about it. I never wanted to be an ag pilot. And I had friends at ag pilots that offered me jobs. But right about that time, I had, everybody kept saying, when are you going to start a school? I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And all these things happened at once. The location, I had a student that really wanted to come over from Italy. A friend gave me an incredible deal on an airplane, and I thought, well, I'll just jump into it, but I didn't give up the seat thing. And then the school went really well. I enjoyed it so much more than I ever thought I would. It's been so fun and so rewarding, and just been one of those great experiences. So I sort of moved away from the seat flying and focused on the school and flying air shows. So
Yeah. And how many years ago is that now that you opened?
it's been more than 5.
Yeah.
And I still have that yearning to go back to fire flying, but I have to finally accept it's probably not going to happen now because I'm too busy with other stuff. So, but the school's been great. It's we get the best people and all kinds of people. We get young pilots that are been flying all their life, but they're too young to get their license. We get older people. We get that just want to have a good time and just become better. We get pilots who've never done a real deep stall or a spin. Lots of pilots have never done a spin. And I feel like we're doing really good things for, helping people become safer. And I have great instructors, as you know, because you've been there and a couple of times. And so, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so fun.
Anyway, I hope it's great for our students, but I've enjoyed
I had fun.
It's rewarding.
Yeah. And so, but also recently you also came out with a video series with Sporties, which is a really cool way that people can learn from you without necessarily having to get to St. Augustine. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that the one thing about the school is enabled me because I'm not doing well. And then of course in 2020, I didn't do any air shows. Maybe I did one little one just down the road. But it's enabled me to be home for more than a week at a time. And, get a puppy. I got a puppy, right? And I mean, I always had dogs, but think about other things too, which, being in one place, it's, you think you're going to get all this, these projects done on the road and you don't. It's, having home and has enabled me to do these bigger projects that I've thought about for years. So I'm now I want to do this kind of stuff more. It's been great. We produced our first set of videos, 3 videos with Sporties last year called Basic Aerobatics. And they're really not a substitute for in-cockpit training. They're really to enhance your in-cockpit training. So I don't think anybody should go out and teach themselves how to do aerobatics, by looking at a video or reading a book. I mean, that's just crazy. But and I mean, I never would have done that. I know you wouldn't do that, but it's there to enhance that. And it's how to, what are aerobatics all about? What are the basic maneuvers and a little bit more than the basics? And what's the way to do them with both airplanes with inverted systems and without? We use a decathlon and an RV and an extra. And I had so much fun. Took a long time. I had so much fun writing the scripts and working with Sporties. such a, amazing company. I mean, everybody knows Sporties. And,
Right.
My first aviation Christmas, when I first got my license, was a whole Sporties Christmas. My husband gave me all this airplane stuff. I'm like, where's the diamonds? Where's the jewelry? And it's great. And so it's been great. We've had really good reviews on the videos, and it's also good for people who come to our school, of course, but also for somebody that's learned aerobatics a long time ago and they just want to brush up on certain maneuvers. Where do you go for that? It's really hard to know. Anyway, we're just in production now of our next video, which is tailwheel checkout, and it should be out in late November sometime before Christmas, and it's super comprehensive. We go into everything from what's a tailwheel, how to pre-flight a tailwheel, what are some tailwheel airplanes, how to taxi, take off, land, and then we have advanced tailwheel. We're gonna have some really cool bush flying in there. We'll have some glacier landings, and
Cool.
So it's been really great. And luckily, I have so many friends that are accomplished, bush pilots and tailwheel pilots that I can contact and say, hey, give me some pictures here, give me some video. We want to include this in here, and so it's going to be really, I think it's going to be really good. It's pretty long, so it's pretty comprehensive. And
I'm gonna have to get it for Daniel. My husband's still not certified to fly our airplane, so he needs to study.
Yeah, you'll have to. And I'm really hoping that this encourages people to get a tailwheel rating, because we talk a lot about, well, why get one? Why is it going to make you a better aviator? Why is it fun? Why is it exciting? What can you do with it? What kind of planes can you fly with it? And it opens up
cool ones.
Oh yeah. And another, the history of airplanes. You can fly a Champ, that was built in the 40s and have a great time for $20,000 or whatever it costs to buy one, or so I'm really hoping it encourages people. And so thanks for letting me blather on.
Oh my gosh, of course. This is part of what this is. Also, with your course, it was so great to get the basic aerobatics course, because just like you said, before I bought my airplane, when I was still just taking lessons kind of sporadically, it was so good to stop the loss of knowledge, because when you're not actually practicing or taking lessons really consistently, it's so hard to actually maintain any level of proficiency at all. And so just be thinking about it, and to have visuals that go with as you're trying to chair fly, I think it's so valuable.
Thank you. We have those 360 videos, so you can feel, you can play that on, you can walk around with your iPad and you can actually move it and be in the cockpit and look outside. Where do you look? You look left, and then you look up, and you're looking for the horizon. And so they did an amazing job with that.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately it helps you, save on more lessons, just because when you show up more prepared, and you can get more out of it because you're not so rusty, just because it's more current in your brain, and just the chair flying helps so much. So it's an awesome thing.
And there's so much more to aerobatics than meets the eye, right? You see, oh, it's just a loop, but a loop, oh my God, it's a whole nother world of, there's so much to it. And so much of aerobatics is where to look. You're not just looking straight ahead the whole time, because we can't see anything, Right. So much of what we teach, and so much when I'm training people, is look left, look up, do the, and, I think that it'll be helpful to teach people that too, that it's not just pulling back and getting the plane to go around.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I had a couple of people submit questions that they wanted, so we can get to those. What is something you wish you knew when you were going through flight training? So maybe a lesson you learned later on that you wish you had known earlier.
Gosh, that's a great question. I have no idea what I wish I'd known, because it's been so long now. I've been flying forever, it seems. Wow. What did I wish I'd known?
Sorry, the first one's so hard.
Well, it is a hard question. I think I wish I'd known, and I think I did, that it was really a methodical process, and they're not going to be instantly, accomplished without experience, and, I think that my self-confidence in some ways would have been better if I'd really kept that perspective, but you don't have perspective until you have experience. So it's hard, but
Yeah.
I mean, people go through these plateaus and, you think kind of like with, do you think I could ever compete? Am I good enough? And it's not about whether you're good enough. It's about whether you take the time, have the motivation, put yourself out there, that kind of thing. I mean, anybody can do this stuff. So even if you're going through a plateau and you lose confidence, you're not the only one.
I actually remember when I was going through my private pilot training, I was having a lot of trouble with power off stalls, and I emailed you and I was like, I was pre-solo, like, I don't know, maybe 15 hours of flight time. And I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to get this. And you were like, calm down. And if it was easy, everyone would do it. Just keep working at it and all of that.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, if I can do it, you can do it. Look, I'm like 5'3". I tell people 5'4", but I'm really not. I'm really little, and I'm not superwoman, and obviously, and if I can do it, you can do it, right?
Yeah, it's a good message. At what point in pilot training does it make sense to start aerobatic training?
Well, a lot of people ask that about, when to start aerobatic training. I don't think there's any time that's too soon to get some basic aerobatics. But I know when I was getting my private, I was worried about what would happen. What if I get into a spin,
Right.
Doing a solo cross country, and I'm going 50 miles. I'm like, gee, everybody talks about these things, and I have no idea what I would do. I'd probably panic, and, so I think getting spin training early on is probably a good idea, and some deep stalls, and make sure you can recover from that kind of thing. And then I think after you get your private, it's a good time to start. We get a lot of requests from student pilots, or some requests from student pilots who are worried about not knowing how to recover from things. I'm like, just finish your private and then come and take lessons. At least get a start, do maybe a day of upset training and some basic aerobatics, but it's a lot to take on, getting a private and taking aerobatic lessons. So,
Right.
then I think after you get your instrument training is a really good time to get more aerobatic lessons, because you're so focused on looking inside the cockpit, and so many people go from private to instrument, right? So, and you're just sitting there staring inside, and to get people to look outside and have a better situational awareness and a better feel for the airplane, it's a really good time to get that kind of training to transition you back to actually feeling the airplane.
Yeah, I remember after instrument training being like wowed by being able to look outside again.
No, right?
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's a hard transition for sure. What things do you think are lacking largely within the pilot population skill-wise when they come to you for training? Like, what are the biggest things that people and pilots in general need to work on?
No rudder, lack of rudder usage. So, we joke as instructors. So, if all I just had this t-shirt and all I said was right rudder the whole lesson, I would be at least, it's all I have to say sometimes. Looking outside, better situational awareness, use of rudder is not taught. And, the planes that you're flying really don't require a lot, but you still do need to use your rudder, and not really getting into any deep stalls. People get up to the stall warning and they think they've stalled, but they haven't. So those are really important skills. You don't get your best performance unless you're using your rudder. And I remember when the light bulb came on for me, I was in Alaska. I was probably working on my commercial. I can't remember exactly. And I was flying with my my favorite instructor, who I did a number of ratings with. And we were in Hope, Alaska, across the inlet from Anchorage. And it's a small dirt runway in the trees. And we're in a 150 or 152 or something. And I think, yeah. And that's where he said, look, if you don't use your right rudder on this, you're not going to get your best performance. You have to get over the trees. Here's what it takes. And it was just night and day. It was just like the light bulb was like, oh my God, I used some right rudder. I had much better climb performance than I've ever had, because the ball was centered.
Actually flying coordinated.
I was flying coordinated. And so I get my students, I should, I always say, okay, I watch them fly, for a flight or two. And then I see I have them look at the altimeter. I'm like, okay, look at your altimeter. It's kind of pretty slow climb rate, right? And they go, yeah. And I go, okay, add a little bit right rudder. and then look at your altimeter, and the altimeter goes zoop and starts moving. And they're like, what happened? I'm like, the plane's in trim. You know, you're really getting your performance now. Before that, you had a lot of drag on it. So
Yeah.
that's one of the best ways to really check to see if you're using enough right rudder.
Yeah, absolutely. Good tips. What is your recommendation for a student who's currently learning aerobatics for their first aerobatic airplane purchase?
First aerobatic plane purchase. Well, I love your plane, Julia, the 150 horse decathlon. Citabrias are great too. There's different models of Citabrias. Some have more inverted system than the other,
Right.
but they're a really fun airplane. They're not expensive, and you know, there's nothing wrong with the 150 Aerobat, 152 Aerobat. If you know, they're getting expensive though. I'm not sure if they're more expensive than a Citabria or not. I'd probably go with that over the
Right.
Aerobat. I've flown the Aerobat quite a bit, and it's a pretty fun airplane. So you have some options.
For sure.
You know, and even if you have the money to buy an extra or a game bird or something like that, go with something lower power. You're doing yourself a favor. You know, I hate to see somebody miss that step. It's a real mistake.
Yeah, the decathlon does you no favors and gives you no free points.
Oh, right. You have to work really hard at learning energy management and all those important things. So
yeah, for sure. And on the note of affordability, how does the average flight student afford aerobatics?
I don't know. That's a good question. Things have gotten so much more expensive. I think that sharing airplanes is a really good way to go. If you can find partners that you are in the same, you know, wavelength with, and the same vibe and the same astrological sign, you know, we're all Virgos or, you know, whatever, but somebody that likes to keep things clean, you know, and you do too, that kind of thing. Finding a partner is a really good way to go. I wouldn't, you know, a club is one thing, but with aerobatic planes, I'd be more leery about that. You know, you have 7, 8 people flying a plane, or 5 or 6, and you're like, I don't think I'd be real comfortable with that unless it was, you know, 172 or something like that. But the aerobatic plane is different. People can overstress them. You have to watch out for that. But if you have 1 or 2 really good partners, I think that's a really good way to go. I think, you know, I get emails sometimes from people like, I want to be an airshow pilot. What do I do? I'm like, get a really good job, go be an airline pilot or a corporate pilot, and then you'll have all the assets, you know, resources and time you need. It's hard.
Yeah, for sure. And what about for training, in terms of affording aerobatic flight training?
I don't know how people afford anything. It's, you know, I know I had to work really hard for years. I mean, I've had sponsors and things like that, but I had to get the training first. And, you know, it's hard to make money in this. It's, there's ways, you know, you don't have to pay for it all at once. That's what I tell people too, when they first start flying. You don't have to put 10 grand on the table to get a license or whatever it costs now. You know, you put down $1,000, get a few lessons, and then you work, and then you get some more, and then you find people to help you. And then maybe you get a scholarship, and, you know, there's a lot of those out there.
Yeah, I got an ICAS Foundation scholarship for my first few hours of acro. So that was really helpful.
Yeah, ICAS is a good one. ICAS has several. And I know there's some others out there too. I mean, sometimes like the local 99s chapters for the women.
They do aerobatics and emergency maneuver training and all of that. Yeah. There's I think there's a couple of women in aviation ones too that are for upset recovery or things like that. So
and pay it off in chunks.
Yeah, whatever you got to
do. Sometimes bigger things like, oh, I can't really afford it, but it'll force me to pay for it. It'll force me to do it if I put it on a credit card.
Yeah, it's definitely
bad advice from PWAS. Don't listen to anything I say. Not about money anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's definitely, I think, a barrier to entry for a lot of people. But yeah, I think getting a good job helps a lot. I mean, that's kind of how I did it. I waited till I could afford it from making enough money. But again, in aviation,
I've never let money stand in the way. I have always found a way. And even if I can't afford it, sometimes I'll do it and then I'll find a way to pay for it.
Yeah, figure it out.
Very irresponsible. And I know it's not like younger generation now, college students and people like millennials are very much more focused on career and saving money than my generation was.
Yeah.
We were like, whatever, just just do it. It'll take, and it has worked for me for the most part. But it's, you're a very responsible generation.
We're trying, right?
I know. Sometimes I think, God, cut loose, spend some money.
Well, we bought the airplane, so that counts, right?
You have done really well.
Thank you. So to wrap up, what advice do you have for a current student pilot or someone in flight training who wants one of these unique kind of different aviation jobs? Maybe they want to fly for CAL FIRE. Maybe they want to be an airshow pilot. Maybe they want to get a real flying job in flight competition aerobatics. What advice do you have for someone watching this who, wants to go do some of those cool things?
I would say take advantage of every opportunity you can. I mean, don't be stupid and fly with people that you don't trust or have good intuition about, and ask about it. If somebody offers you a ride, check into them. If you have a bad vibe, if you don't like the way they walk and they have an attitude, and you don't like the way the tie downs look on their airplane, don't do it. But if you have a good feeling, if they look like they're, methodical, perfectionist type people, take advantage of that. People in aviation we're like religious, about spreading the word, especially to younger people. Like if you show interest and you go to pilots meetings with a bunch of geezers, those geezers will jump on you and give you everything they can. They will go out of their way to help you. So you'll have opportunities if you just show that you're interested. But I would say get all the experience you can, get a tailwheel rating. If you have that opportunity, get your seaplane rating, go live in Alaska for a couple of years and go instruct up there. Go take advantage of don't give up any opportunities, and then it'll lead to other opportunities.
I love that. I mean, I feel like that's a lot of what I've done too. Just say yes to anything that seems interesting. Yeah.
I mean, as long as you have good intuition about it,
Absolutely.
Yeah, don't turn it down because it doesn't come up again.
Right.
Most of those things only happen one time,
and you don't know what they'll lead to.
I mean, I know with me, I'll offer somebody, somebody in high school, let's say they're whatever, young person, if you come around, we'll put you to work and we'll take you for a ride or whatever. And not all of them take you up on it. And that's okay. Maybe they're meant to be doing something else, but it's also like, that's too bad because you don't know where that could have led,
For sure. Yeah. Take those opportunities.
I'm blathering on again.
You're good. Well, we're at our hour. Thank you so much for
fun. It's been fun chatting. It's like having over.
I know. Yeah. I'm about to open some wine. You want to come over?
Yeah.
For sure. Well, I'm sure everybody enjoyed, listening in on our little chat. So I hope so.
And if anybody has any questions that's listening, feel free to email me at just pattyaerobatics@gmail.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions if I have the answer, or I can ask or send you to somebody, whatever. But if I can help, let me know.
Yeah. And if you're interested in taking an aerobatics course, check out pattywagstaff.com and you can book flying with Patty herself in St. Augustine, Florida. It's a really fun trip and I would definitely recommend it.
It's a fun place to go no matter, even if you don't fly, it's fun.
That's fun place to go. It's just a fun town to visit.
Thanks, Julia.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
What do you think?
Oh, I think we're done.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot. I'm going to sign off.
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay.
All right. Talk to you later.